On a beautiful Saturday in May, my 4-year-old son, Hudson, was dressed in a baby blue tuxedo jacket, looking small and darling and bored among so many adults. I felt eyes on me throughout the ceremony. Well, I felt eyes on me from the moment I walked in. I understood the surprise, the curiosity. I was met with puzzled looks and conversations full of head tilts like I was sick and dying. How are you? I was fine. On the ride over, my fiancé, Mark, commented that I had seemed way more anxious about my 10-year high school reunion when I had to see my old boyfriend. Once we arrived, we saw familiar faces, including my ex-husband, John, who gave us both gigantic hugs and a quick rundown of how Hudson's mental state was faring without a nap. John went off to mingle, and so did we. Mark and I started talking to one of John's co-workers standing nearby, who said, "You and John get along so well." Yes, we did. We always had. We'd always been compatible in the way that well-suited roommates were. He remembered to put the spigot down after his shower so the water didn't attack me, and I wouldn't walk around naked when there was no intention of sex. We split dog duties and bills and chores. We didn't fight or yell or slam doors, even at the end. We were desperate and drowning at the end, yes, but argumentative and explosive, no. Where some couples may be ticking time bombs by that point in their marriage, the point where it's irreversibly broken, John and I were civil, friendly even. We coexisted as we always had, and remained inexplicably stoic until the night we officially decided to divorce. The night we cracked under the weight of what we'd become. There had been several weeks of conversations around the topic. Conversations had actually been going on for months, starting about 7 months into our marriage when I was 4 months pregnant. We went out to dinner, looked at each other from across the table, and both said, "What did we do?" I'll tell you what we did. We got married too fast. We started dating in July, got engaged in September, and got married in February. We got married during the honeymoon phase, that early phase in a relationship where you're trying to be the best version of yourself as a way to ensure the other person will like you. And that is never sustainable. It was a perfect storm. We'd both come out of long-term, tumultuous relationships and were looking to lick our wounds with someone easygoing and emotionally available. Then, we both unexpectedly lost our jobs, and I think subconsciously craved a sort of stability that we imagined marriage could offer. An engagement came soon after. Had John and I dated longer, we would have broken up. We would have realized that despite our easy laughter and attraction to one another's brains, we weren't perfectly suited for each other. We weren't madly in love. We would have decided to just be friends, and probably would have meant it. Instead, we became husband and wife. So there we were, a Mr. and Mrs. who willingly entered into one of the most sacred contracts there is, whose parents were both still married and likely wouldn't understand if we had a change of heart, who wed in a lavish ceremony that the bride's parents forked over tens of thousands of dollars for, who felt like throwing in the towel wasn't an option. We were grown-ass adults. We chose to make this commitment, and now we were going to have a baby in 6 months' time. We'd make it work. And maybe it wouldn't be so hard. I mean, we genuinely liked each other. That surely counted for something. We started seeing a marriage counselor after that dinner, who was unhelpful at best, and then proceeded to live in a daily purgatory of denial and indignant resolve. We carried on with life, trying to accept that this was the bed we made. I gave birth to a perfect baby boy. and John and I embarked on parenthood together. We kept our heads down until after Hudson's first birthday. And then one night, we had a come to Jesus moment, and the word divorce officially made its way into our vocabulary. Nothing dramatic preceded our discussion that night. The discussion was inevitable. If you bury someone alive, it's only a matter of time before they claw their way out, before they gasp for breath and beg not to go back under. We put Hudson to bed in his crib and sat in the dining room, John in a chair and me cross-legged on the table. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my eyes on my wedding band and nails and water bottle, but not my husband. His head was in his hands. How did we get here? I'll tell you how we got there. We ignored the red flags. The absence of passion, the fundamental differences in how we viewed and valued money, time, and priorities, my borderline disdain of his parents. At the wedding, I'd insisted on using gardenias. In the bouquets, centerpieces, boutonnieres, on the cake, in my hair, covering the altar. But by the time the wedding started, they'd all turned brown. By the time I walked down the aisle, the gardenias were dead. Looking back, by the time I walked down the aisle, so were we. Or we were at least in the process of dying. Wilting, unnourished, struggling. The honeymoon was over before the wedding began. 2 years later, we sat in our dining room up against a mountain of reservations. Besides our belief in the sanctity of marriage and being raised as church-going Baptists who were supposed to be wed till death did us part, we knew marriage was work, and people were flawed, and there would be inevitable shortcomings and compromises. And we even understood that happiness wasn't always synonymous with marriage. And we knew people stayed together for the kids. Could we make it work? I mean, if we stayed married for Hudson's sake, could we do it? Could we continue to plaster happiness onto our faces and raise Hudson under the same roof for the next 17 years and then divorce when he goes off to college and begin living the separate lives that would make us happy? We could, but would we want to? I wanted to ask John, but the lump in my throat was in the way. "What do you want?" John asked me softly. Our eyes met, but then mine moved to the framed photo behind him of last Halloween. Hudson was dressed as the cutest dog there ever was. I told him I wanted to make sure Hudson never had to pay the consequences for us not having our shit together, whether it was from separate homes or together in that one. Then I asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted our son to feel loved every moment of every day and didn't want him to feel like we took the easy way out, like he wasn't worth the fight. But was divorce the easy way out? Divorce would be excruciatingly hard, but wouldn't staying together be just as hard? Both roads led to broken homes. John said he felt selfish. I did too. I mean, why did we want out so badly? We weren't suffering at the hands of abuse or adultery or skeletons we couldn't shake. Nobody was breaking dishes. Nobody was filled with hate or animosity. But this was our life, our one life. And we wanted more. Didn't we deserve to be happy? I asked him as much. And then, so quietly, maybe it was to himself, he said, "It isn't just about us." Our needs and Hudson's needs collided at that moment, and that's when we started to cry. We cried for saying "I do" before we understood all it meant, for knowing that we were about to monumentally let everyone down, for the months of exhaustion trying to adjust who we were, for bringing a baby into the world and not being able to give it back to him, for our shame and our white flags dripping in defeat, for getting to a depth we couldn't survive. In unison, we collapsed onto the ground, the lowest place to go. We spoke when it warranted words, and we stopped when words couldn't quite articulate how much we felt. And our tears turned to sobs, and our sobs turned to wails. Our pain was raw and came out in carnal noises we didn't recognize. Our broken hearts were bleeding, and we let them. After 2 hours of words and silence and tears and sobs and wails, we made the decision to get divorced. Balled on the ground, inches and miles away from each other, we decided to end our marriage and change the trajectory of the future we thought we knew. And we felt alone and together and lost and found. When we finally got up off the ground, the air up there felt different, not as polluted. Where would we go from here? We'd rewrite divorce. Our eyes locked and we spoke silent vows. We would love Hudson and each other. We would be intentional and forgiving and patient and fair. We would put Hudson first, always, and make up for everything we did wrong by doing right by him. I love you, one of us said. I love you too. We both knew it was never about not loving each other. It was about not being the love of each other's lives. It was about the difference. 3 years later, long after we gave ourselves permission to lose it, to see what we would gain, we were both at that wedding on a beautiful Saturday in May. I was the ex-wife at the ex-husband's wedding. I was the mother of the ring bearer, the beautiful boy in the blue tuxedo jacket sitting on the tree stump at the end of the aisle. John read the vows he had written to Julie. True to form, they were touching and brilliantly crafted and had perfect amounts of funny. When it was Julie's turn, she spoke about waiting her entire life to find someone like him. Then she had Hudson stand on his stump. Hudson, I will be present in your life to play and have fun. I will try to be a good example and to show you lots of my love and God's love. I will listen when you want to talk and tuck you in and say prayers at night and feed you chicken nuggets and sauce and hopefully more someday. Thank you for being a part of my family and letting me be a part of yours. And that's when I started to cry. I cried for all the people whose eyeballs bored into the back of my head that would never get to feel the luck of passing the torch. For all the nights that Hudson would be at John and Julie's house instead of mine, but with the absence of competition. For no longer suffocating under the burden of failure. For the fearless foursome who was going to raise that little man together. For John, who looked like cupids were going to fly out of his ears. And for my complete lack of wishful thinking. But mostly for the bonus mom who loved my son. I cried for my gratefulness that there were more people to love him every moment of every day. Thank you.
That's Krista Morgan. Give it up.